Good morning, guys, and welcome to the show. Fernando.
Welcome to the show.
Today we have one of those things where I get to talk about something that is from the past, but we have it here now. Dude, it's Dean's Classic Amplifier Review. Does that sound like a cool name, Fernando?
Sounds like a cool name, yes.
This one is extra special. This one is extra special, and I can't wait to share it with you. It's unique, and it's come home. It's been a long time. Let's take a look at it, shall we? This is the McIntosh MC 420 power amplifier. This thing is gigantic. It's 14¼ long by 12 inches deep by 2 3/4 inches thick. It's a monster. This is 50 watts by 200 watts. That's all this thing does. And this is the owner's manual. Very classy. It came gold. It has this. It's super sexy. And we're gonna get through all of this. To start, when you bought the amplifier, you got this 2-year limited warranty on this embossed trophy paper. I've had guys that have framed this and put it on the wall. It's super sexy. It also came with this. McIntosh's final performance verification. Model MC420. Serial number was handwritten in. Test voltage was 14.4. Ohm load 4 ohms. Inspected by L.S. PJ. Rated specifications: idle current 2 amps. Load current maximum 35 amps. Power output channel minimum 50 watts. Short circuit 30 seconds. Total harmonic distortion 0.005%. IM distortion maximum 0.005%. A weighted signal to noise ratio below rated output with 2 volts of input. We'll circle back around to that 2 volts of input thing. Negative 110 dB. And of course, each one of them is verified by PJ. This came in every box. This was an experience buying one of these amplifiers. You were buying a piece of history. When we sold these, we put a lot of care, a lot of time talking about the history of McIntosh from Binghamton, New York, how they started making amplifiers for a dentist's office, playing that jingle style music that you'd hear in an elevator, what we'd call elevator music back when we used to have that kind of thing. They would make mono amplifiers. Everything they did was just like you're just part of this bigger company. Opening up the owner's manual, you have the 2 amplifiers. However, you still got an amendment telling you what size screwdriver to use for the amplifier. They have important safety instructions before you again, and a thank you. Thank you for choosing McIntosh. You have acquired a component of sophisticated design, matchless construction quality, outstanding performance, and extreme reliability. Please take a few moments to read through this manual before you attempt to install or operate your McIntosh amplifier. The design of these components is unique, as is the method of operation. And it truly was. There was a lot of things about this amplifier that were very unique, and we're gonna get to all of those. This owner's manual is one of those unique things, and there's a few key things in here that I wanna go over. Anytime you sold one of these amplifiers, there's a page you filled out. Before you begin, serial number, purchase date, 12/12 of 94. Authorized location, Audio Video Emporium, and the installer that was going to do this, who I still know today. This is my writing. AVE, or Audio Video Emporium, is where I sold this from. This was an amplifier I sold to this particular person back on 12/12 of 94. I sold this amplifier. That's why I said this amplifier has traveled through time and space to come back to me. Holy crap, it's unreal. This is a very special product for sure. And as soon as he opened this up and he says, yeah, I got this back then, and I was like, dude, that's my writing. I recognize that chicken scratch. Blew my mind. The introduction to the amplifier is something you just don't see anymore from a manufacturer. Both the MC420 and MC431 are 4-channel automotive amplifiers with bass equalization, built-in electronic crossovers, and bridging capabilities for both pairs of channels. Both amplifiers share similar features and circuitry, differ principally in power power outputs. The 420 produces a rated 50 watts per channel into 4 ohm load, while the MC431 is 100 watts per channel into the same impedance. Both models have fan-cooled and heavily protect against thermal overload, overdriving, and short circuit at the output. Both models are designed to limit distortion at outputs even in the presence of excessive input levels. We're gonna get to that in a minute. A characteristics which translates into a greatly increased margin of safety for loudspeakers. The MC420 431 are provided with high quality gold-plated input jacks, speaker connectors. Input sensitivity is adjustable over a range of values which permits optimal blah. And so then it gets kind of boring. But that part right there where it talks about designed to limit distortion, I had forgotten about this feature. And that, my friends, is the Power Guard feature. Power Guard was something that McIntosh came up with in their home audio and has translated it into the car audio. You really couldn't screw these things up. People tried. You could put these in, you could almost just totally destroy the gain section on these and they would still sound good and perform because of Power Guard. Provides a unique protection circuit. Power Guard, designed to protect loudspeakers from damage that can be caused by amplifiers which have been driven into clipping. Power Guard monitors the output of each amplifier's channel and reduces input levels for a fraction of a second when distortion detected at the output rises above predetermined levels. Power Guard is much more sophisticated than typical limiters or soft clipping circuits and is entirely free from breathing effect or other forms of audible misbehavior. Power Guard, which is triggered by distortion, comes into play only when the amplifier is overdriven when the circuit is activated. The amber Power Guard light indicator flashes on the front panel. The Power Guard light is located here in this little tiny hole right next to the power on light. Power Guard would be an amazing feature in a modern amplifier. This would solve a lot of issues, but it would also probably create a lot of headaches because some people, which this talks about in here, like a little bit of distortion, and this was saying no, you can't do that. However, because they realized people are kind of silly that way, they actually put a bypass in it. Next to the remote turn on, there's a PG light for Power Guard, and if you grounded that, it would shut the Power Guard circuit off in the amplifier and essentially make that function not work. Why anyone would do that, beyond me. We never did that because we didn't want any blown speakers. Another thing that's unique to this amplifier is when they talk about here, turn on delay, it did have a 2-second turn on delay to let the amplifier power up and do its thing. Thermal protection on this was way cool, and I'll show you once we get to the actual design of the amplifier. But let's fast forward back here. It came with a bass EQ circuit built into it. It has 2 frequencies on it. One is 45 and the other one is 150. 45 was a 4 or 8 dB boost, whereas the 150 was a negative 3 dB or 6 dB cut. The 45 was obviously there to boost bass, and the 150 was there to reduce distortion caused from the acoustics of the cabin of the vehicle. It had electronic crossover at 80 or 120. It was made to be a 4-channel highs amplifier. It has an RC output, and you could adjust that to feed the 80 Hertz or 120 out of those into your sub amp if it didn't have a crossover. You could also use this as a 3-channel configuration to where 1 and 2 would be for highs, 3 and 4 would be for sub. The amplifier could be bridged. One of the things I wanted to point out in the regarding power rating and speaker loads, they write, while these amplifiers are stable into 2 ohm load, we decline to list a rating for 2 ohms because we do not wish to encourage operation at these impedance. Operating direct coupled solid state amplifiers into a very low impedance load presents additional stress which will inevitably lead to a shortened operation life. Could you imagine if an amplifier today were to write this? No one would ever buy that amplifier, ever, because, well, we always want to drop it down to the dirt, man, just as low as it'll go. In the back page where they give us the specifications, this is the fun part. This is what separates 1990s tech with today. And there's some ratings on here that are amazing, even by today's standard, and probably better than some amplifiers. But then there are other things on here that you're gonna be like, wait, what? Minimum sine wave continuous average power output per channel at all channels operating into 4 ohms. 50 watts times 4. Rated power band is 20 to 20,000. Maximum harmonic distortion at any power level from 200 milliwatts at rated power output 0.005%. Dynamic headroom 1.3 dBs. Frequency response 20 to 20 plus 0 to negative 2.5 dBs from 20 to 20 hertz, as well as plus 0 to negative 3 dBs from 10 to 50,000 hertz. Basically, this was a high-res amplifier before high-res amplifiers even existed. Input sensitivity, 0.3 to 2 volts. 2 volts of input. I know, it's crazy. Like I said, by today's standards, no. The last page that they give you on this, there's only one manufacturer I know that still does this. This is the flow chart for the amplifier, how it all works. And I believe Audio Control is the only one that still does this. There might be others, and if you know of one, please put it in the comments. It's always nice to go look at these things. But this is designed so that you can simply turn it, look at how the amplifier is set up and how the signal's passing through the amplifier in case you run into any issues or you want to see how the amplifier is functioning with the EQ section, the crossover, and all the activities on it. This was really common to do back then. We've looked at the Orion amplifier, and at the time it had something like this that was actually silk screened on the back of the amplifier. This can be very helpful. I wish manufacturers still did this. And then on the very back you have this nice gold embossed McIntosh logo. As I said, you are buying a piece of history. That instruction manual alone is enough to just like go like, oh my gosh, like who does that? And nobody. You can't even get an owner's manual with an amplifier anymore. You have to go online and download it. This feels like something you'd get from like your tax guy. I mean, it's like, wow, a legal brief. Unbelievable. Let's take a look at the amplifier because it doesn't stop there. They were so far ahead of their time. Here we go. When this amplifier came out, it had a retail of about $1,000. One of the things that was super expensive in making this amplifier was this right here. This is a solid piece of glass. This was the first thing to change once they revisited the amplifier and decided to come out with a version 2. It wasn't a solid piece of glass anymore. It had a piece of metal here, piece of metal here. There was still glass in the center, but it was a thick 1/8 inch piece. Finding one with the original glass that isn't broken, well, yeah, that's something special. There was 4 Allen head screws that held it in place. And one of the things that would always get lost is the little sleeve. This is so you don't crack the glass. They also give you a safety screw so that it won't get tight and there again, break the glass. I have seen these broken and it's just, oh, it's so sad. The corners, you drop it, it would break. Because it was glass, and at the time, they were really particular about their glass. Most modern McIntosh amplifiers have a glass front panel. This was available with meters as time went on, those awesome blue McIntosh meters. But this piece of glass actually delayed the release of the amplifier because it wasn't up to their standards. Paint job wasn't right, and also they would run out of the glass they'd have the amplifier, so they wouldn't be able to fulfill orders because of it. Now there is some rubber grommets that are located on the bottom of this. It being this old, you kind of gotta work with it because it would stick and you don't want to break the glass. So we'll just take our time here. There we go. It's starting to get loose now. I'll just wiggle it some more, and there we go. Look how thick that piece of glass is. Beautiful. Obviously it has a sticker across the back to prevent you from scratching it. Oh my gosh. Whew, man, and it's sharp too. Yeah. Naturally, when you'd be working on these, this would be put into foam. We'd set these back into the stock room. These things would get hidden. These just wouldn't be like laying in the trunk or anything like that, because to replace this was several $100s for just a piece of glass. Let's look inside the amplifier. If you notice that this is kind of small, why would they have all this space? Well, there were other modules. There was 3 to be precise that you could pull this out and put other EQ modules into it. This was just the basic one that came with every amplifier. The problem with those modules is that most people didn't buy them, so they would just sit on the shelf. It wasn't like now where everyone wants to have an EQ or a DSP or something like that. It wasn't as important. You were just buying this for straight power and it looked cool. To get the module out, there's 2 Phillips screws, and then on this end here is the connector. So you just gotta kind of take your time, rock it back and forth. And it just looks like a connector that you would see like on the side of any amplifier right now. I believe this is like the same thing that Audio Control is using for their Bluetooth on the side of the amp. So this is pretty standard, hasn't changed much. 45 hertz, flat, plus 4, plus 8. This would really make your mid bass jump out. For the 150, you have your 3 switches there. And what you'd essentially do is just sit in the car. If you're doing mid-range, you'd sit there and you go, like it, don't like it, don't like it, and then you go, all right, oh, I like that, yeah, that's nice. What about this? And you just flip through the switches until you found the one you like. Deeper into the amplifier, you have your channel mode. So this has to do with how you're gonna run your input, 2-channel, 3-channel, or 4-channel. The high pass filter was for all the channels, with the exception of if you were gonna be using the subwoofer. There wasn't like a front and rear, so you couldn't do like 80 on the front, 120 in the rear. You just had to pick one. And that was like, kind of a major bummer. As time went on, we'd start to use these with external crossovers and just leave everything to out. It was kind of a design flaw that in these first generations, it's just what you got. And then subwoofer, if you set it to external, then the RCA would feed that frequency out. Or if you flipped it to 120 or 80, it would automatically tell it to just use 2-channel input, and the 2 channels of input on 1 and 2 would feed all 4 outputs. So half of it, 1 and 2, would go to the high, 3 and 4, you could bridge off to a subwoofer. The crossover was kind of like, why did you do that? They went even farther on the gain controls. So you have an individual gain control for each channel. You couldn't cross them over individually, but you could adjust these, which was very handy for level control. If you were setting it up for a left and right, if you didn't want to do level control, you would have to set each one with a voltmeter to get them all the same. However, what we would do is we would, before time alignment existed and we even thought about that, we would use this to steer the sound towards the driver by turning down channel 1, turning up channel 2, and so on and so forth with 3 and 4. Plenty of installers that would just sit there and just put them all at 12 o'clock and thank you, bye. The next kind of like, oh man, for the amplifiers, these silver bars right here. You have to remove these in order to get to your input. Phillips screw in the side. With the 2 screws off, this just lifts straight up. Ugh. And you could know which one was for which side because this one says power guard and power on it, and it's notched on either end. In the end, however, are these square little receivers for these screws. They never glued them in, they were just there. Which in this case, this one, it's not there. They've actually used a drywall mount, but this one still has the little black thing in it. The reason for that is these would just fall out as you're installing the amplifier, and then you'd have to look all over the place to try to find them. A terrible design. We can get this one out. Yep, see, it just comes right out. Now we just put this on a laser or 3D print it, but back then, you know, you'd do something like this just to get the screw to go in because you didn't want this thing to rattle and make a bunch of noise. With that end plate off, that would get us to the power input. The remote turn on was not on this side, it was just power ground. And it's an 8 gauge for something that's this big. It's only 200 watts, so you don't need anything bigger than that. They also use circuit breakers, which I was not a fan of, and here's the fan, which we'll talk about more once we get to the side of the amplifier. On this side of the amplifier, you have inputs 1 and 2 clearly marked negative, positive, bridged, positive, negative here on the bottom. Remote turn on is just called on, and PG was the power guard. Inputs 1 through 4, outputs for subwoofer. When you selected external, if you wanted to run 80 Hertz to your amplifier, you'd plug into here, and if you wanted to run 120 Hertz to your sub amplifier, you'd plug in here. On this side, you have outputs for 3 and 4, just like you do here. And these are very similar connectors to what Rockford is using now for their T-series amplifiers. You just put the wire in, little set screw, and it would pull the wire into the square mount, nice and tight. 12 gauge was not going in these easily. This was 16 or smaller, which at the time was weird because everything was getting big speaker wire. Copper was cheap and you just used the crap out of it for everything. Everything about this amplifier was thought out to the maximum that you could possibly think of. And that includes the fan. If you look here, you can see this hole here compared to this hole down here, the sizes are different. The reason for that, they would progressively get bigger as you can see. That way the fan would dissipate air equally all down the side of the amplifier. It wasn't just one big open circuit and would just pump air out. That didn't work because all the air would expel here and not make its way down. So McIntosh engineered this system so that you'd have the same intensity all the way down the amplifier, and it would equally distribute the heat out of the side of the amp. No amplifier unveil would be complete without pulling the bottom of the amplifier off. You are going to be disappointed, but we'll do it anyways. And there you have it. If you open an amplifier up now and you saw this spacing, you would lose your mind. You'd be like, what? 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 Dude, man, they're cheating me out of power. When this was designed like this, they're again for maximum cooling, to allow that tunnel for that fan to move air out of the amplifier. When you look over here, when's the last time you saw power wire in an amplifier? You don't see it there anymore. Main, power, and ground are here. This is your circuit breaker. The reason why this was nice is because, believe it or not, the circuit breakers would eventually melt and you could just push these down, unscrew it, pull it out, and put a new one in. If you look closely, there is some corrosion on the board. This is no longer a functioning amplifier. It does have some noise in one of the channels. That's why it ended up here with me as more of a nostalgia piece. Over here you can see where it has been signed by a creator. There's some gunk here on the board where it's starting to corrode. Back in the 90s, I had a full McIntosh system. I had the McIntosh radio, I had the McIntosh speakers, I had the MC 431. I swapped that out for the 6-channel. I did not use the McIntosh subwoofer, although I did buy it. I didn't like the way it sounded because I was more into big fat boomy bass and it just wasn't doing it for me, so I traded that in for an XTR Orion. I had a full Mac system. After I got rid of that Mac system, I bought another car and I had another Macintosh system in there. So I've had several Macintosh systems and I've sold tons of Macintosh gear. This, however, means way more to me because this is one that I had actually sold back in '94. This is priceless. This is something that I will cherish forever. I want to thank the gentleman that brought me this amplifier and was like, hey man, this probably means more to you than it does to me. I want you guys to have this. This is awesome, super awesome. I've wanted to get a Macintosh amplifier for our display for a very long time, but everyone kind of treats them like they're gold and this, it wouldn't have been the same, you know, but this is something I could never expected to get our hands on, and now that I have it, oh, this is so cool. I don't care, it doesn't work, it doesn't matter. This is a piece of my history and I'm super excited to have it. So thank you. We hope you enjoyed this little piece of history that has just been fun and exciting, and we've been sitting on it for a couple weeks and just finally glad that we've had time to talk about it and share it with you guys. As we said before in these, if there's that amplifier from your past that you just wish you could get your hands on or just talk about, or you may still have it, let us know in the comments below. It's always fun to see what is that one little gem for you. I'm just happy that I finally get to play with some of these gems from my past and you know, bring them back. Fernando, if you please.
On to the next one, guys.
You guys have a great night as always. We'll see you later next time.
Bye.
Bye guys.